Ukraine launched ATACMS, about 8 of them, into the Belgorod region. Russia says they shot all of them down. Russia has said that they will retaliate and that the collective West is a major part of this attack, meaning that nothing is off the table. However, there's a lot of considerations to be made here. And Scott, I want your first reaction on this attack and where it fits into the overall picture for the Ukraine conflict.
Well, I mean, the use of ATACMS by Ukraine is probably one of the most dangerous events of this entire conflict. It's the one that has the risk of bringing us closer to nuclear war with Russia than just about anything else that's been manifested in this conflict. And the reason is that the ATACMS missiles fired from Ukrainian soil have the potential to hit targets of strategic interest for Russia, targets of strategic sensitivity. And if enough of these targets are struck at the same time in concert with other conventional weapons releases from Ukrainian soil, for instance, of Scalp missiles and the French or the British Storm Shadow, I think the Scalp is the French system. This could be part of what Russia would fear to be a preemptive attack, seeking to decapitate Russian leadership or otherwise suppress Russian strategic capabilities. And this is something that Russia has always had a doctrine saying they would respond to, but now they've specifically addressed this very issue in their most recent doctrine. And in short, the use of these missiles from Ukrainian soil, even by Ukrainian forces, because these missiles were provided by the United States, targeted by the United States, etc., this exceeds the threshold necessary for Russian nuclear weapons release. And I just want to make that point one more time. The use of ATACMS missiles by Ukrainians against Russian soil exceeds the threshold set by Russia in its nuclear doctrine for release of nuclear weapons. So if we wanted to go to war, nuclear war, if Russia, doctrinally, the smoking lamp has been lit. Fortunately, Russia doesn't want to go to nuclear war, and Russia has sent a signal to the United States. There was a phone call sometime in November between General Gerasimov and General Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Russian Chief of Staff. The contents of the content haven't been publicly released in terms of a transcript, but the one of the topics that has been claimed to have been addressed in this is that Gerasimov said, look, if as long as the ATACMS are used to a certain range threshold, we'll just blow the crap out of Ukraine. That'll be our response. If it exceeds that threshold, then we're coming after you. And so far, Ukraine has been firing ATACMS missiles below that threshold. So if the reported conversation is true, all parties have received notice. The problem is Ukraine is desperate. You mentioned in your opening statement about an offensive in Kursk. It's literal suicide. I'm sure Andrei and Larry will be able to add things to that. It didn't work. It's not going to work. They're all dying. Zelensky is furious at Syrskyi because he was supposed to create something that allowed Zelensky to, in effect, blackmail Trump and say, you have to continue funding me. Look what happens when you give me money and the great successes the Ukrainian army has. We need to go on. But instead, all the Ukrainian soldiers dead. It didn't work. The Ukrainians are desperate. And my concern is that the Ukrainians will release ATACMS at ranges greater than the threshold set by Russia. And in that case, I believe Russia will use the Oreshnik missile, multiple numbers of the Oreshnik missile, against targets of strategic value. They won't be nuclear attacks, but Russia will pound the living snot out of Ukraine using Oreshniks. And it'll be a statement not just for Ukraine, but for Trump as well. And the statement is, we really don't care about you anymore. You're irrelevant to us. You mean nothing to us. We're going to finish this war the way we want to finish it. And you get in our way, that's going to happen to you. We're not playing games here. And it's also a message being sent to the British who are behind the Kursk Offensive. This is a British operation, British planned, conceived. It's part of the British mindset of how to keep Ukraine in the fight. And it's a message to the British, and it's a message to the French, who still operate under some misconception that, and the Germans, that they can send troops to Ukraine, and that the conditions will be created there. They can send these troops to Ukraine. I think Russia, if pushed, will send a strategic signal in the form of multiple Oreshnik missiles that will have horrific impact on the targets, because the targets that will be selected, I believe, won't be a throwaway demonstration target. I think it will be a target of strategic value and of visual value, meaning it can't be hidden behind a wall. For instance, if Bankova Street ceased to exist, that would be one such target. And I think the Russians are in the mood right now where they may be ready, willing, and able to pull that trigger. That's one step short of the next to last step before a nuclear war, because if that doesn't work, the next thing is to strike NATO targets. And I believe that three most likely targets are the two anti-ballistic missile systems, and one in Poland, one in Romania, and Ramstein Air Base comes up there as well as the heart of the logistics transfer. And then the next step after that is nuclear war, and it's so we're 3 steps away from a nuclear war, and Ukraine appears ready, willing, and able to facilitate that. That's what has me worried.
Larry, I wanted to just bring you in and ask what your reaction is to, Scott used the word desperation. We have these reports about a renewed offensive in Kursk. How do you see these developments, given what Scott just said there?
Well, since we're in the middle of playoff season in the National Football League, and even most of the rest of the world has become acquainted with American football. Let me use a football analogy. The Russians are ahead 70-0, okay? And we're in the 4th quarter, and it doesn't matter how many Hail Mary passes, how many onside kicks, how many desperation plays the Ukrainians make. They ain't going to win. They're losing. They have lost. There is no recovery from this. And it is the proverbial chicken with its head cut off, running around, bleeding everywhere, creating some mayhem and chaos. And I think the Russian leadership understands that they're not getting too excited, too emotional about it. They're going to secure their victory. They understand that, the West is so detached from reality with respect to, we'll get a freeze in place. Yeah, the credibility of the West is now zero with respect to Russia. They've been screwed over through whether it's the withdrawal from the anti-ballistic missile treaty, Minsk I, Minsk II, the withdrawal from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and then the betrayal in Turkey, where they actually they had a negotiated settlement back in March, April of 2022. So there's nothing that Ukraine can do that's going to change the outcome. The trajectory is set. Like I said, they can throw Hail Mary passes. They may even score a touchdown here and there. Doesn't change the final score, doesn't change the outcome.
Andrei, could you provide an assessment of this, what we've heard about this so-called Kursk offensive, this renewed launch of attacks, as Ukraine has already been pushed down to the Suja region. Now they're saying that they are on the offensive again, or at least that's what the Western mainstream media says. What is the reality on the military front?
Western media, the same as most media in the world, do not understand the difference between offensive and attack. And attack is a maneuver. Okay? So they it's about 10 hours ago, they tried to conduct attack in 2 battalion groups. After 6 hours, there are no battalion groups left, and there's no attack. They just literally, washed themselves in blood. They were met with obvious, firepower which is there. And Abtiel Udinov actually went on TG channel about 3 hours ago. She said it's over. It's gone. There's nothing there. I mean, only the burned, equipment, and as usual, bunch of the corpses. And that's what it is. It's even one of the headlines today in Russian media. I don't remember which one. They say they use the Ukrainian cannon fodder for the fireworks, for firecrackers. Just to hey, we're here. Help us. Correct about Trump. Now, if people do not understand the scale of this, today, January 5th. I wish it was August, but January 5th, 49,000 killed of the Ukrainian forces in Ukraine, Kursk alone. So they lost their huge combined arms army there. And as Scott stated, British or French, these guys are not professionals in operation planning. They are looked at as amateurs. They still believe they operate within this, I don't know. They evidently do not understand the modern battlefield. They do not understand how it works. They do not understand how to calculate proper force. They do not understand how to sustain it. But you would expect this from British and French, especially British, with their, quoting Doug McGregor, Lilliputian force. And their military education is a joke. So there you go. And as a result, we have these numbers. Today alone, 2,500 killed along the front line. So 18 years old are coming. And this will be the last of the sperm bank of Ukraine. And Russians will oblige, they will kill them all.
Scott, there have been some who have come to me and said, or have sent me messages, communicated with me saying, each time that Ukraine launches ATACMS. I know they don't have that many left, but they've been launching them consistently since they received approval from the United States, or green light, or whatever we want to call it. They say that the response has been too soft, that there hasn't been a hard enough response to this. What do you have to say to people who say this? Most people who have come to me with this reside in the collective West. They're observing it from the outside, and they believe Russia should take an even harder response to these transgressions.
Well, I think Larry touched upon this. Russia's winning. Well, how hard do you want Russia to get? Go to the front line in the line of contact anywhere, in Kursk or anywhere, and count the dead bodies. They're almost all Ukrainian. Look at the advances being made. It's all by Russia. Russia has a strategic objective in this conflict that's been consistent from day one, and they're achieving it. The one thing that can disrupt this is if you do something that changes the military correlation of forces. And the only way to rapidly change the military correlation of forces to the detriment of Russia is to introduce NATO forces or European forces in significant numbers. And that's a political decision that can't be made under the current circumstances because the costs would be unacceptable to the West. But if Russia overreacts, if Russia does something that creates a new political, operating environment where suddenly people in Europe take a look at the risk gain analysis and say, hey, Russia's gone insane. We have no choice now. We have no choice but to commit to a Ukrainian fight. It doesn't matter that Russia will probably win that fight. That's a fight Russia doesn't want. Russia is not looking for a war with NATO. Russia is not looking to expand this conflict. Russia is looking to win the special military operation and achieve the objectives that have been laid out very clearly by the Russian leadership. So I would tell the people that are looking to, strike harder, go get your passport, travel to Russia. I'm sure you can find one, some unit to sign up with. They'll give you uniforms and you get to play soldier for a day, go down there and die. If you want to hit harder, go hit. Otherwise, shut up. Because if you don't have sweat equity or blood equity, if you're an analyst, stop talking about other people dying. I mean, if you're going to say Russia has to strike harder, explain why. Why do you believe Russia has to strike harder, other than, serving their, their need to, be a part of the conflict, remote control? No. If you're an analyst, then you have to step back and you have to assess. Now, if they wanted to come in and say, we believe that the ATACMS missiles are having a significant strategic impact on Russian command and control, logistics, all this, and that left unresponded to, or left responded to with the soft reports, the correlation of forces are going to shift in a matter of 2-3 weeks, and the Ukrainians are going to achieve battlefield dominance that will be strategically decisive against Russia. If they want to make that claim, then you can say, yeah, maybe Russia has to hit harder. But as Larry said, Russia's ahead 70-0. And if Ukraine wants to make the score 14-70, the game's still lost. But I'm just telling you right now, A, they're not going to score 2 touchdowns. And B, in playing the Russians hard like that, they're going to get so many injuries that the final score is going to be 120-0. That's the reality. There's nothing that can happen right now to change the outcome other than changing the political environment that allows NATO to think they have to intervene. Russia is not going to do a favor to Ukraine. That's my perspective. Russia's hitting as hard as Russia needs to hit, and it's pretty damn hard. It's pretty damn hard. People, I don't know what they think's going on the front lines now. They think it's a game. They think Russia's around there just doing a waltz and all this. Russian soldiers are fighting and dying every day in some of the harshest modern warfare conditions you have ever seen. They're fighting against an enemy who is tenacious, an enemy that if you make a mistake because they have training, they have weaponry, they will kill you. And there's a lot of dead Russians that prove that point. The Ukrainian army's pretty damn good. They're probably better than any of the NATO advisors whispering sweet nothings in their ears. And those boys are out there fighting and dying on a battlefield against Russians who are fighting their butts off, and you want them to hit harder? The people who say that have no clue whatsoever what they're talking about. And I apologize for getting angry, but I just get tough. I get very upset with armchair warriors who think that they're, that they can type on their keyboard, hit harder, and that somehow means that they're real men. If you're a real man, get off your ass, go to the battlefield, strap up, go to the front line. And if you make it, you come home, I'll buy you a beer and say, wow, you're hard.
Larry, when Scott was saying sorry for being angry, I was thinking, why? Because this is this whole situation is infuriating, to say the least. I mean, we have an endless, what seems to be a forever war that the United States and NATO are continuing to push. Do you see, Larry, any possibility for some kind of shift in the U.S. and NATO's policy vis-a-vis Ukraine?
Well, it's going to be compelled by what Russia does, because they're not going to willingly do it on their own, I don't think. And part of the problem was, and this has now, I think, been pretty well exposed over the last 3 to 4 weeks. When Donald Trump was doing his Person of the Year interview with Time Magazine, he started talking about the casualties that were being suffered by both Ukrainians and the Russians, and he had the Russians suffering a lot more casualties, and basically said that that's what he was being briefed on. So that means the CIA and maybe the Defense Intelligence Agency, they're briefing Ukrainian lies. They're briefing what the Ukrainians are telling them. And instead of any kind of independent analysis by the CIA to come in and say, yeah, this is what Ukraine says, but we have double checked, we've looked at this, we've done some other efforts to corroborate it, and it's not true, it's the exact opposite. That's not what's happening. So what you have is an intelligence community that's misleading the policymakers. And the policymakers are going into this with a set of assumptions which are just flat out wrong. If we flip the script, if Russia was doing to the United States via Mexico or Canada or some other proxy what the United States has been doing to Russia via Ukraine, we would have already declared war and used nuclear weapons probably. And so it bespeaks of the patience and the wisdom, I would attribute it to wisdom on the part of Putin, to recognize that there are great risks that accompany this. And part of the problem that undergirds this is the United States has never paid a price in any of its wars, including World War II. We haven't paid a price in war since the Civil War. And what I mean by a price is that when, say, 10%, 20% of the population experience loss, usually it's about less than 1% of our population experience loss, have lost a son, a father, an uncle, a cousin in battle. And so because we've never paid that kind of price, we're very cavalier and careless when we go meddling about overseas and don't care what happens if we touch off a war. Whereas Vladimir Putin and his Russian cohorts, they understand it. Because during World War II, about 16% of the Russian population experienced a combat casualty in their family. At least 16%. And when you add in the wounded, the number gets up closer to like a third of the entire population of the then Soviet Union, but Russia in particular, experienced loss. So they understand that that this is not a game. And the thing that I find so outrageous are these generals, these retired hacks who, as Andrei correctly notes, have never won a war in their entire career. And yet they sit around and pontificate about Russia should have done this and Russia should have done that. And these are the guys that couldn't even beat a bunch of goat herders in Afghanistan after 19 years. So the short answer to your question after a long-winded response is, no, the West, Russia would be a fool to accept any kind of negotiating position from the West, because Russia's holding the cards, and Russia wants something much bigger than just an end to cessation of hostilities in Ukraine.
Andrei, you've written many books, especially not just on geopolitics, but the overall how we should understand both the military and political aspects of geopolitics. And I wanted to ask you, I think, earlier when I asked Scott about the people who send me messages talking about, well, Russia needs to go harder. They need to smash Ukraine quickly. They need to end this right now. I wanted to ask you, from the perspective of Russia and the overall geopolitical situation, why is it then that Russia decides to pursue the path it has in this war of attrition on the battlefield? And perhaps you could also update beyond the Kursk region what's happening on the battlefield that might help us understand this.
Well, Scott and Larry already stated that actually Russia's objectives are clearly stated since the day one, pretty much. And for those people who also wanted to know what is the special military operation, the chief of the GOL, which is main operational directorate, Colonel General Rudskoy, he spoke about this in March 2022. It's just that nobody listened. And so when you have these people, as Larry correctly stated, CIA, whatever the hell those guys, they never saw anything like this. They don't have reference point. They do not understand this is the largest war in Europe since World War II. And now today we reached more than 1 million. And so, altogether, we're looking probably at around 3 million casualties, killed and wounded and missing in action for Ukraine. And in this case, there is nothing really to add, because why would Russia kill more of its soldiers when you have the enemy which literally comes to you? Because this is the only thing they know, and it's like they think that movie pattern is the, documentary. And but the reality of war, of course, is much more prosaic, and it's much bloodier and much dirtier as anything out there. And there is no need to throw, for example, all those big arrow offensives, to capture something which you can move approximately 1 kilometer a day along the most of the front line, and you can still achieve what is the most important thing, which is now they want to Gerasimov doctrine Well, here's Gerasimov doctrine. If to rephrase Clausewitz's famous dictum that the main object of war is to compel the enemy to do our will, Gerasimov doctrine, as well as the Russian whole, mindset, is the main object in the war is to physically annihilate the enemy and then dictate our will. And that's exactly what is happening. And judging by the panic and exasperation and desperation in media and all those nincompoops who pretend that they understand what is going on, as Larry correctly stated, they come up with, and they basically breathe lies. And I encountered on a number of occasions, it's just, what is this? Most terrifying is those people who are supposed to be professionals, they be that CIA, be that US Army, whoever they are, the Defense Intelligence Agency, they swallowed this hook, line, and sinker, this propaganda from Ukraine. It's literally terrifying. Guys, where's your tactical and operational awareness, situational awareness? And they produce those numbers which are preposterous, but they don't have toolkit, even supposedly very many of those professionals, to even make the adjustment or even to make proper assessment, because you need to understand how it all works. They still do not understand how it all works. They still throw in, if you look attentively at this pattern, some of it is British plan, others are American plans or joint plans. That's the only thing they know, how to throw the troops at the wall and see what sticks. So they did already now the million killed of Ukrainians. How many millions maimed and absolutely scarred for life? We can only we can only imagine, and that is catastrophe for them. And the ramifications, of course, are. And Russia is not gonna. I agree with both Larry and Scott that Russia is not gonna allow some kind of the PR effects, because we have the guys. Let's keep it. Scott said it. Larry said it. You have those gamer boys primarily from the mama's basements, okay, who wanted an instant gratification. It's like buying the hamburger, in McDonald's. Just drive through, get me the hamburger, give me more, this adrenaline, just to see all those wonderful pictures. Reality, of course, is that, yes, as Scott correctly stated, it cannot get any harder than that unless we want to go full Monty, and then it's going to be bad for everybody.